Hey, welcome to the St. Louis Syndicate. College football time. I'm Nate. He's Brandon. Welcome in. Talk about March Madness in December. Brandon, this stuff is crazy right now as these teams have been just named yesterday. We've got the playoff picture up in front of us, and I know before we started this recording, you and I were talking, and things were just flying about what could possibly happen. I mean, look at this bracket and look at the playoff matchups that potentially could happen in the conference championships. What do you think about the committee coming out and saying, "Oh man, you're not going to get penalized"?
Yeah, I think you have to do it. I think I personally don't like them coming out and saying anything.
Yeah,
That's the way I would go if I was running this cabal of big money donors or whoever they let vote on this stuff. I go, you guys don't get to see inside the box. Like
right.
we have a contract with what is all of this running on Disney
Yes.
to put up the best games that we can put up, and that's what we're gonna do. But I get it. I don't, obviously I'm a Mizzou fan. We're not getting anywhere near this for years, so I don't get as passionate about it as some of the people that are up here fighting for one ranking over another. But I think that if you get to your conference championship, unless you're going to make the bracket all conference champions,
Yeah.
that you can't go, hey, Georgia lost this week and we're going to drop them down below Alabama, who is
Right.
at home hanging out. So I think logically you're stuck there, but oh boy,
Yeah.
we have got some fun games this weekend, and we are chalking this thing up to have a battle over a month's period of time.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. And I think you make a really good point, right? One of the things we talked about was um, just be wary, college football fans, that there is a big media player part of this, and they want the best matchups on TV. So, looking at this schedule that's on the page right now, it's going to change significantly. Um, Brandon and I kind of agreed, kind of disagreed, kind of agreed that ultimately, if Oregon and Texas win, regardless if Texas wins by 50 and Oregon wins by one, the zero behind in Oregon for the loss columns probably going to keep them at one, even though Texas may be making a case by knocking off a very
Yeah,
strong Georgia team. But other than that, this thing's going to get moved and placed for the best television matchup. And I'm not opposed to that. There's going to be people crying, especially the people that are boosters and donors and fans of it. But at the end of the day, I want to see a good matchup follow all the way through with good betting angles, fun teams to watch, and maybe, just maybe, a lack of repeat. So to
sure.
me, looking at Ohio State and Tennessee sitting here going into Oregon, that doesn't look nearly as interesting to me than an Ohio State Notre Dame matchup into Texas. And I say that because none of them have played each other this year. Where Ohio State's played Oregon, we've seen that. If they meet again, let's play in the championship game. If they're the two best teams, they're the two best teams. But why do we have to
Sure.
have that in week two? Just my thoughts.
Yeah, you're very right. And for me personally, I would love to see them screw around with the rankings so that as many of these first week of games is up north as possible. Because
Yeah.
I want to see these guys play in the cold. I want to see them play in the snow if possible. I want to see some some wars go on. So yeah, if we can jumble it up so that we're not having repeat matchups, the upside is the bottom half of the bracket with just throwing in a jumbling of this Big 12, ACC, Mountain West, whoever the top two ranked champions are. You're going to have fresh games down there no matter what, because
Yeah.
they're going to be playing guys that they don't ever see. And they're going
Oh,
to get a shot at sitting at home for a week, watching some tape on two other teams, and then trying to give them a run for their money. But up at the top of the bracket, it would be quite nice to get some of these other guys mixed in here so that we have a couple of weeks of fresh matchups before. Look, the obvious thing is that Oregon and whoever the best SEC team are probably going to end up playing for the championship. Like that's how reality works. But if we can watch a couple of snow games in the interim, boy, that's going to be fun.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, look, think about what Arizona State and those kids would be like when they go to Penn State right
Oh,
now. Oh,
sure.
they're going to be cold. Oh, it's cold up
Yeah.
in Happy Valley at this time of year. And man, if it just happened to be snowing, how cool would that be? But anyway,
Yeah.
couple upsets potentially, right? Though same thing here. We've got the 3 and the 4 seeds are actually ranked 8 and 10, and that could actually get worse, right? Boise State gets beat by UNLV. Boise State's out. UNLV's in, and I think they're 20th right now. I mean, they may come
They
to
are.
like 17, but that's going to be a pretty low rated team with a pretty high seed. They're going to potentially get a bye. Actually, they may not, because if SMU takes care of business and Arizona State does, then Arizona State
Right.
could slide up and maybe, there's a whole lot of movement that could occur. And I think that's what we want you guys that are looking around out here to know. This playoff thing is fluid. I mean, look, Clemson beats SMU. Does that mean that a two-loss SMU gets into that 11 slot where Alabama is with 3 losses? I mean, I think there's a fair argument to be made that that should happen. But then on the other side, man, I was talking to a buddy of mine today, and he's going, "Yeah, but Alabama's 3 losses are all the top 7 teams," and I'm like, "Oh, Jesus, that's hard to argue with." Also,
That's the real hurdle, right? You have these lower um conference, you know, big winners
yeah,
that played nobody that has a high strength of schedule. And I think the upside is going to be that these other conferences are going to have to rework some of what they're doing to make sure that the teams that are trying to be at the top of the conference are going to go out there and play some of these other teams that will allow them to bring their strength of schedule up.
yep,
And and that will put these teams in a much better place if they can actually go and win those games.
yep, absolutely. Um, I'm almost to the point where I feel like the conference championship games are going to become unnecessary in the future. They may phase them out and add another round, like maybe it's the top 16 and there's no conference championships. There's going to be some, and maybe the number 1 and the 2 seed are guaranteed to get into the top 16, something like that to to incentivize. And I know it's going to expand the bracket, but I'm telling you, after a year or two of this, people are going to go, "We want more playoff. We want more playoff. We want more playoff."
Oh, that's where we're headed anyway. Like I don't know, I don't know all of the pieces that you can move, but like it feels that long term we end up with two conferences and a 32 team playoff at the end of the season would be my guess.
That'd be good.
Like I don't know why you wouldn't be working towards that to go or maybe four conferences and collapse. I don't know. It's really hard to look around because I would have said, hey, we can mess around with the bracket, but we shouldn't mess around with the conferences. And then they just keep messing with the conferences. So at a certain point, you're probably right that the conference championships don't really mean anything when Oregon is playing to win the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Like that, there's no context for that. It doesn't matter. Like
What is the reward here for Oregon to win the Big Ten? To say we're the best? Well, they've already won it. Right now,
well,
you could. Yeah.
especially after this week,
Yeah.
right? Oregon wins the Big Ten, Texas wins the SEC. We're done with all the shenanigans.
Yeah.
These are the two teams that were supposed to come into their new conference and be taught a thing or two about a thing or two. And
And they're.
instead, they're teaching everybody else. So if that's what it's going to be, then and I have to imagine that that's driven by the changes that we make NIL and all this sorts of stuff and being able to transfer and all that fun stuff that we're building into basically minor league football
Yeah.
at this point that you do have to kind of go. which way are we going to work strategically? Are we still going to care about these conferences when clearly very few of the teams actually care?
Yeah, the schools don't care
And
about the conferences.
well, certain ones do. You got Ohio State and Michigan, Georgia and Bama and LSU, and like they care a bunch. But does anybody else? Is the
Yeah.
question. And if they don't, then cool. Turn it into the North versus the South, or North, South, East, and West, and just go. Hey, everybody needs to play. You know, 10, or maybe you could do it with 12 even, and you know turn it into, instead of a 4 week shindig, we turn it into a 5 week shindig, and we've got 32 teams in there,
Yeah, it's
and
getting
each
close.
direction gets 8 teams, and there you go. You guys can just hammer it out, sort of thing, and that be that that be the totality of it.
Don't get me wrong. I'm so happy that there's 12 right now, but you can just smell where this thing's going. It's just a matter of
Huh?
time. Yep. And there's
Yeah,
too
they
many
just have to
dollars
make
in
these
the
little
table.
baby steps.
Too many dollars.
Because
For you
Well, and the
betters,
only constraining thing is the number of weeks, right?
right?
Like you only want college players playing so many games, you know. But with giving, the way they have it structured, where they go, we're gonna give some teams some buys, and yada yada yada, and fool around with it. Well, expanding this to 32 only adds one more week of games, basically. You can go from 12 to 32 if you get rid of buys and whatnot. So at that
I would
point, you're just going, we start the bracket this week, basically.
I would argue that two ways. The first is to make it happen. Start a week earlier in August instead of week 0. Just start earlier because the kids are back at school
Sure.
practicing anyway, and then build in
Yeah.
an extra bye week, right? So instead, maybe they have an early season tune-up game or something, and then a couple games, and then a bye, and then kind of roll that way. The other piece of this is arguably these are paid athletes now. They're NIL players. Why does it
Uh-huh.
matter how many games they play? They're paid to play.
Well, no, definitely from that position, very defensible. I think that um, they're going to take small bites, right? Just from the PR side of it. Um, because they're still not being paid directly by the institutions.
Right. They're
So
still
we're
working on
still kind of talking out of both sides of our mouth with this thing, where the college football goes, hey, we want to do this new thing. And they go, oh, okay, so all of your donors can pay these, players now, with pro athletes, basically. And so at some point, when that kind of continues to get melded together, and we get a couple more years under it, and all this stuff becomes a little more institutionalized, yeah, there's no reason that you go, okay, in the pros, they play, what, 22 weeks if you play all the way through to the Super Bowl.
it. Yeah.
Um, and you go, okay, well, we're going to play,
16,
basically
17.
17 weeks, if you play all the way through the college football championship. And you go, okay, well, we're going to shorten it by, or maybe you figure out a way to get it to, 6
Well,
weeks difference or
it
something like that.
it becomes an incentive driven thing where um, each team is guaranteed 13 games. And then if you make it to 14, then that's considered like your bowl. If you make it to week 15, each player on the team gets a $5,000 bonus. If you make it to week
Sure.
17, each team gets a $15,000 bonus. If you play a championship game, each player gets $20,000 bonus. And because then we're compensating them for the additional time spent on the field. Um,
Right.
and so I think that at some point in time, there's a way they can get to that. And there's also an earning power there where you will see people strive more towards that. It'll make the business more corrupt, but that's where we're at now. This thing's corrupt anyway.
Well, yeah. Yeah. And they'll just convert all of the bowl games into, bracket games,
And, and don't
just
put
like they're
gamblers
kind
in
of
charge of it. We'll just be like, you've got to play 52 weeks a year. Just
Look,
when you graduate,
every
we
week
want to
with
see the new
football.
freshman class start that
Yeah.
next week, and we want to see freshman
Well,
games.
no, I would much rather watch somebody play football than nobody play football.
Yeah.
So, like, however we can get them out on the field, I always lean that direction for sure.
All right. Betting wise, just real quick, SMU, they should probably dominate this matchup. They're 2 point favorites. In theory, if they are as strong as they think they are, they should take care of this from a gambling perspective. I would say that I'm leaning towards SMU for a pick. I would also lean towards Texas for a pick, or excuse me, Georgia. I think Georgia takes care of Texas at home, and I think that's going to cause some havoc at the top of the bracket.
Yeah, I think both of those are really good spots. Also, I'm definitely big on Boise this week. That feels like, again, if you are a, you know, institution that has been built around winning the way that Boise has, and it's given them the stamina to get up into like the 10 spot from a Mountain West division. You
Yeah,
can't let UNLV get a running start as this is one of their first couple of years in this wave of being good. Topple you right before you get a chance to have a bye week. You can't do that if you truly are Boise State.
agreed. I agree with that, and I would be curious to see if the coaches can translate that message. I think as
Sure. Right.
betters, as college football fans, we can see that. But I would argue also that some of those kids playing haven't been around when this thing was building up over the last 8 years like we have.
No, that's true. That's true. And look, every one of these they're lined this thin because that's the true power rankings between these teams.
Yeah.
I think that at least historically for me, the way that I have been able to be successful winning when you get around to bowl games and the playoff and all that sort of stuff is going, I'm going to bet on the team that has been here before and has the coaches and the senior players and these guys that are used to doing this thing. And I don't think that it is normally reflected properly in the market.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think that I can't wait to see where this thing shakes out next week, man. It's going to be unbelievable. So we've
It's
only
going to
got
be
a
a
couple more
blast.
college episodes left. And then we'll have to find something else to talk about. But hey, he's Brandon. I'm Nate. We're the St. Louis Syndicate. Good luck with your picks.
Cheers, guys.